Are you sure this is where you want to be? Mumbled the taxi driver. Yes and no, said Al Gore, taking off his seatbelt. He patted the shape of the gun in his suit's breast pocket. Wait here, I won't be long. Fi aman Allah. Al took in the scene. A populated slum outside Sarajevo. The place looked like it had been in a bomb testing site, a trash heap, and an immigrant camp, all within the last few weeks. Lopsided streets were disrupted with rubble and colourful tents, framed under the buildings of concrete or rotting timber. Bosnia had its sights, with its late medieval townships and rolling pastures against Balkan mountains. But to Al, this was the only spot worth anything. His duty lay in these slums, and once Al was done, it would be a merrier world.
Allahu Akbar.
Without Allah's help, Al could never have found this place. His clothes looked awful, dirty and worn at the seams. He had lost a few pounds in his search as well, amidst the ceaseless travelling and sleepless nights. He would have to get back to full health before returning home. In a few short weeks, he would be Vice President of the United States, under Bill Clinton's presidentship. The election had been won, and President George H.W. Bush was finally on his way out of office. The war against global warming was just beginning. He saw a barefoot, scrawny man shuffling past. Al went up to him. Do you know where the opium den is? Other than the specific city, this was one of the few details he had received from Allah's vision. Opium, the man croaked in broken English. He pointed down the street towards a low building with a blue tarp over the entrance. Blue one. As Al strode towards the building, he nervously tapped the concealed gun with his palm. This moment was a long time coming. He ran over the details of the encounter in his mind. The man Al was looking for couldn't fight back or defend himself. At this point, he was 101 years old. Regardless, at an opium den he was probably stoned out of his mind. He left his weapon in his pocket. There was no reason to enter a public smoking room armed. Expecting to search for this man, he lifted the tarp and entered in. It was a completely bare room, only populated by a black man in an old vest and tweed jacket. This was the man he had been looking for. JRR Tolkien himself. He was out of whiteface and wore no wig, but his features were unmistakable. This was the best-selling author of the Middle-earth universe, still alive 20 years after his alleged death in 1973. His leathery black skin was weathered with age. He looked up from a document he was reading and blinked a few times. Drawing a pipe from his mouth, he squinted. Albert Arnold Gore, Jr. I've been expecting you, but not here, not today. This is the day Allah has willed it. John Ronald Raoul Tolkien. You never figured out my true name. I assume your published name was real. That was my white name. My birth name is Marcus Ramon Regis Tolkien. Now that he was here, Al had no reason to not have a conversation. He had time. He sat down on the floor opposite to the black author. Why opium? Tolkien looked at his pipe incredulously and gestured towards the jar by his side. Opium? Mr. Gore, that is tobacco. I'm only here for the ambience. There was no indication, Tolkien assumed, he was going to die before this encounter's end. How could he remain so calm? Global warming. How did you do it and why? It's a long story, though I admit I am quite fond of those. I suppose what made all this possible was my Palantir. I will not tell you how I discovered it, or where I have hidden it. But without it, I could not have seen the alternate world of Arda, or into our future. A darkness is coming. A darkness beyond imagination that deceives as it corrupts. It will be celebrated by the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. It not only ruins my life's work, but makes a damaging blow to art itself. I pleaded with God to send a great destructive threat to this world, one that springs from one of my most hated things, industrialization. He answered my prayer, and he told me in a dream he had started a devastating change to the climate caused by greenhouse gas emissions. I wanted to make known this threat, and God granted me, through my Palantir, the ability to possess someone for a limited time to get this message to the world.
Al wondered what this darkness could be. What could warrant such a great threat to life on Earth?
Allah told me this. He also told me that it was you who possessed my body and used me as your messenger. I feel my knowledge of your great evil has made me uniquely responsible to combat it, inshallah. My question, however, is why me? I have some influence in my country, alhamdulillah, but why me? I remember looking for who to choose. When I came across the name Al Gore, I began to laugh. It reminded me of the term allegory, something I often have to disavow. I thought it would be particularly ironic to choose you. While I did not use allegory to get my messages across, I did use Al Gore.
What is this darkness?
In the year 2001, the son of George H.W. Bush will become president. Bush Jr. will become our common enemy. That same September, your religious affiliates will launch a terrorist attack on the United States. And only 2 months later, there will be a much greater attack. This is the darkness of which I spoke. Even now, a man by the name of Peter Jackson has released his first theatrical film into theaters. Jackson and Bush Jr.'s spirits are intimately linked in a way I still do not truly understand. Their evil is the same. Their souls are the same. Before the decade is over, Jackson will get the opportunity to direct a film series based on my works. They will turn my work into a consumerist franchise. They will be so terrible, so vile, so deceptive, so foolish, and yet they will change the world. Not even Ang Bang, a result of its popularity which I dearly love, can redeem it. That is what will happen in December of 2001, the release of Peter Jackson's first Lord of the Rings film. That is why the world must be destroyed. May God have mercy on humanity's souls.
Al considered Tolkien's words. It was too much information to take in. He had too many questions. He was overwhelmed with the feeling that Tolkien must die. He leaned forward.
You speak of God, but you mean a false idol. Allah is the only true God. I am a servant of Yahweh who works against you. I fear you are on the devil's party, Mr. Gore. Blasphemy!
Gore put the gun to Tolkien's head. He did not struggle.
What do you think you're doing?
It was hardly a question. He already knew.
It's called jihad, bitch.
Tolkien slumped onto his side, a calm expression on his tired face. Al stood slowly and put his gun away, wiping off his face. He pocketed the jar of tobacco and peered down at the blood-soaked paper on the ground. It was titled Fëanor Coxeye Speculation, but the rest was obscured by blood. He left. Al was shaking. Outside the building, he walked as fast as he dared, trying to forget the blood soaking into his clothes. The driver stared at him, face frozen in shock, eyes flickering down to Al's blood-speckled shirt. He said nothing. Al's journey home would be long and difficult, not far from one of Tolkien's own quests in his stories. He drew a deep breath. Well, I'm back.
Payment?
Should I use cash or card?
Cash. But anything of value I could use. Really, does not matter.
Do you smoke?
Yes, sir.
Thank goodness, said Al, laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar.